Chapter 7. Into the Mine. As usual, Corey didn't sleep much that night. He tried to stay awake, turning and tossing until the blanket was tangled and Sammy yelled at him. He fought sleep in a dozen ways, reciting the times tables way beyond 12s, but he found his mind wandering. He forced himself to stay awake so he wouldn't dream, and he was drowsy when Mum came in to get him up early next morning. Dad said you'd be going with him today to see if you and Anthony might be mule drivers. Dad talked with Anthony's father yesterday, so Anthony will meet you at the mine. Mum sounded excited for him, as if she was counting on him, and was sure that things would be better now. She and Corey went downstairs, where Dad waited, finishing up a mug of coffee. "How do you feel this morning?" Dad asked. "I'm okay," Corey answered. He sat at the table and tried not to show how sleepy he was. He was worried about going into the mine, and he didn't feel at all hungry. Then, after Mum packed the lunch pails, Dad and Corey kissed her goodbye. "Good luck, Corey. I hope you get a job. I'm not sure how you'll do with a mule, but whatever you do, I know you will be a good worker and a big help to our family." She sounded cheerful, but Corey could see tears brighten her eyes. He and Dad started their hike up the road toward the coal mine. It was still dark and took over a half hour to walk up the hill to the Mountain Crest mine. As they approached, other miners, breaker boys, and workers joined them. By the time they reached the mine, a long line of workers had arrived at the mine and breaker. Their voices, along with the morning whistle and the nearby locomotive on its way to the canal with its load of coal, all made strange music in the morning air. Dad took Corey to the office where Anthony was already waiting. "Corey is back again and eager to work in the mine," Dad told Mr. McBride, one of the supervisors. "The boys are interested in becoming mule drivers." "We do have an opening for one mule driver coming up soon, and there will be more jobs available once the new mules come in from Tennessee. Why don't I take you boys down to the stables? There may be some drivers grooming and feeding their mules down there." "That's part of the job, you know. The mule drivers love their mules, as you've probably heard, but it takes a bit of work to get used to the job, and to the mules." Mr. McBride stood up and signaled for Corey and Anthony to follow him. "Come along." "I'll come too," Dad said. "You're going my way anyhow." "Oh, that's right. You're working on that new shaft. What do you call it?" "The North Star Chamber," Dad answered. It heads due north. We're quite a way into the mountain now. We'll be dynamiting again soon. I found a big vein of anthracite that needs to be opened up." The two men, with Corey and Anthony a few steps behind, went to where the empty coal cars rolled down deep into the mine to be refilled with coal. "Since this car is empty and ready to go back, we'll ride in this instead of taking the elevator cage," Mr. McBride suggested. "Keep your heads down, boys," Dad warned. "In some places, you'll only be a few inches under the rock ceiling." "It would be a bad blow if you hit your head," Mr. McBride agreed as they climbed in. They crouched as the coal car began its swift trip down the tracks with the stone roof just inches above them. The darkness gathered, and Corey noticed the various shades of blackness as they descended deeper into the earth. The excitement and adventure he felt at first quickly gave way to uneasiness, and then dread. The ceiling in the downhill shaft was flashing by close above their heads. "Hey, this is fun!" Anthony yelled. Corey didn't think it was fun. He was feeling sick, and even though the mine was cold, Corey was sweating. He struggled to take off his coat. "Keep your coat on, Corey," Dad ordered. "You don't have room to take it off." Corey hardly heard his father's voice. The rhythmic knocking of the cart on the tracks reminded Corey of the stories his Welsh grandfather told him about Coblin Now, the evil elves that live in the mines waiting to cause disaster. Clank, clank, clank. The sound gave Corey a headache. The clicking wheels of the momentum as the car careened down the shaft. The rock walls that flew by in a blur and the black hole into which they were descending were all that Corey could now hear or see. He was dizzy and sick to his stomach. If he could just remove his hot jacket. He pulled at his coat frantically, ripping the buttons off. "I've got to get out of here. I can't breathe," Corey got to his knees and then tried to stand and escape the terrifying descent into the abyss. "Corey, no!" shouted his father. "Stay down!" "You'll smash your brains out," Mr. McBride yelled, but Corey seemed unaware of the danger. Then, as the car dove under another narrow ceiling, Mr. McBride threw himself across Corey and pinned him to the floor of the coal car. When he awoke, Corey was in the makeshift first aid room in the mine. He was resting on a cot and his father stood over him, pale as a ghost. Mr. McBride was gone, but Corey remembered the mine boss throwing himself on top of him, and that was all he could recall. He sat up and looked at his father. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered, and then hung his head. "I couldn't help it. It was just like my dreams. I was drowning and I had to get out. I hacked in from outside the room. Are you okay now, Corey?" "I'm fine," Corey answered, but his voice trembled. "You'll be fine," Dad assured him. "Mr. McBride pushed you down just in time." "I spoiled everything, didn't I?" Corey asked tearfully. "Are you ashamed of me, Dad?" "It's my fault for bringing you down here. I never thought the dream would come back while you were awake." Dad sat next to Corey on the cot and put his arm around Corey's shoulders. "Are you all right now? Or do you need to get out of the mine?" Corey looked around the room. The stone walls and ceiling had been painted white to look like a hospital room. It didn't make any difference. The cold harshness of the mine was still all around him, pressing him in. "Dad, please get me out of here." "Come on." Dad helped Corey off the cot, and they headed out into the gangway, the working center of the mine, where Anthony was waiting. "It's okay, Corey," Anthony said. "We can see the mules some other time." Corey still felt the mine closing in on him as he entered the great chamber. He closed his eyes as the choking feeling started again. "Keep your eyes closed, and I'll lead you. The elevator to bring you to the surface is not far away. Just concentrate on my voice," Dad told him. Corey stumbled along as Dad pulled him across the stony floor, with Anthony following. "My head is hurting," he mumbled to Anthony. "I have to close my eyes." Did Anthony understand what had happened? He heard familiar sounds, a mule's strange whinny somewhere nearby, wheels of a coal car, men's voices, and the clanking of picks and shovels as miners dug into the walls. He hoped no one could see him being led by his father like a scared little kid. "You'll be up out of the mine soon," Dad said, helping Corey into the cage that would bring him into the surface. Corey opened his eyes briefly to see he was being pulled up. It wasn't fast, like the coal car he had come down on. Instead, it made its way slowly up to the daylight above. He knew that Anthony stood silently nearby in the cage, probably wondering what was wrong with Corey. When Corey felt the sunlight envelope him, he relaxed, knowing he was no longer under the earth. Corey gave his friend a weak smile, and Anthony grinned and nodded. "You'll be all right, Corey," Dad whispered. "Do you want to go home now?" "Yes, I want to go home. How about you, Anthony?" "I'll stay for a while. Mr. McBride said he'll show me around the stables and then I can eat lunch with my dad." "That's a great idea," Dad agreed. "You can tell Corey all about it." Corey really wanted to see the mules, not just to hear about them from Anthony. New mules were coming soon, Mr. McBride had said. This would be the time to make a decision and even get his own mule that he would care for and ride. It would belong to the mining company, of course, but he had heard that the drivers loved their mules and felt ownership of them, and the mules felt the same way. However, the mules all lived in their stables down in the mine. Corey knew that he could never go down into the mine again.